Hi, it's Sunday night, and I am going to carry on with uh, transforming Blue Review into a temporary forum where I can just talk about movies I've watched recently, mainly on streaming. Um, I use Plex, YouTube, Amazon Prime, and now Tubi. My latest finds have been on Tubi. It's opened up a whole new world there because there's tons of titles that I've been looking for a long time, and also a lot of really extreme and underground things that are a little bit beyond the pale for Amazon and their tender sensibilities. They have a lot of issues with content. Uh, I have friends who are filmmakers who have suffered through this, and today I read about some horror writers who published their books online and went through Amazon, and Amazon pulled their entire account, their entire channel, and all their titles, and refused to let them regain an account or make a new account, and then lied to their customers that the publisher itself canceled the orders. Um, and it was over content. It was saying that these are works of fiction, mind you, right? Horror books, horror novels, and it said that they contained erroneous, false, and misleading statements that were undermining the metadata, which was impugning upon the customer experience. So now, if you're powerful enough, you don't only get to marginalize real journalists by calling them fake news, but you can actually marginalize fiction itself by denouncing it as fake news and deplatforming it. I'm not sure why I want to throw that out here first, but it was fresh in my mind and it's very fucking obnoxious. I posted about it on Facebook, and it's, more of where we're headed in this culture, and it's not in a good place for artists and people who want to express ideas that are outside of the establishment, whether these are political ideas or socially transgressive art or sexuality or extreme forms of expression, even if they're fiction. I rail about this almost every episode. Like I said many times, these are fictional stories. Stop it. So anyway, I'm going to talk about a few though that I saw on Tubi. They don't seem to be as fascist as Amazon yet. Anyway, probably they would never be. Have not been owned by Lex Luthor, Bezos head. I don't know who owns Tubi. Probably another giant corporation and another multinational owns it. But it's like a babushka dolls. One within the other ad infinitum. So last time, I almost had time to talk about this first one I'm going to discuss. I reviewed 6 movies last time, so I'm going to do 5 this time while they're fresh in my mind. I'm going to try to give you a few facts, but most of it's going to be off the cuff, so I'm sure it'll just be a lot of rambling. Just letting you know basically what they're about. Are they decent? Did I like them? Are they well done? Poorly done? Etc. Just like I did in the last episode. So the first one I wanted to talk about was called Sick Nurses, and this is a Thailand film from 2007. According to my trusty Letterboxd site here that I have a film diary on, it was directed by Pirafan Loyant and Thadsapol Siriwat. And I'm mangling those names. I do like Thai names. I think they have a certain, I don't know. I like Thai everything, really. I love Thai food. It's my favorite. Thai cinema, I only intermittently encounter, and I have seen a very small handful of Thai genre films. This one is really cool because it came out in 2007, so it's kind of at the height of the J horror, Japanese horror, popular wave that began like in the mid '90s with titles like Ju-on, The Grudge, and Ringu, of course, and Pulse. And of course, by 2000, these tropes had found their way into South Korean cinema, and many, many fine movies have been made along those lines in those years. Um, so this kind of hit it right. I'd never heard of it until I got on Tubi. Then I found out it was rather popular among some people on home video, but that it was actually a colossal box office failure. Supposedly, as of the last year or so, its worldwide gross theatrically was $335,000. That's pretty rough by any metric. Um, but I'm sure it's recouping on home video. I'm not sure what label it's on. I would love to get on Blu-ray, but I think it's only on DVD. I need to check on that. Anyway, what the heck is this thing about? I've been rattling on for 2 minutes about. Basically, it's about sick nurses. Yes. The real title is I can't pronounce it. Basically, you have these 7 nurses in this clinic, and they're all kind of these beautiful, young, kind of hyperactive, giddy, somewhat shallow, materialistic chicks who are kind of, they have this kind of catty dynamic, like something out of a 1980s soap opera like Dynasty or Dallas, and they're all like kind of, I guess, most of them are fucking the head of the clinic, Dr. Tar, who's kind of this, button down, handsome, slick young doctor. And not only are they in love with this guy or lust, but they also assist him in a operation where he sells corpses and organs from corpses from the hospital on the black market. So it's pretty sick, and the sick nurses, and basically he's one of them. Tawan is the character's name. She's the most obsessed with him. She really thinks he loves her, etc., etc. She'd go to any length for him. Well, it turns out he's sleeping with her younger sister, Nuke, and has just gotten Nuke pregnant. And Nuke is kind of our point of view character as we go through the movie. And a lot of this stuff unfolds in not in any kind of linear fashion, time wise. You see some things at the beginning, like the giddy nurses, and then they start having these strange visitations from supernatural things. And then you have flashbacks where you see Tawan and Nuke fighting about Dr. Tar. You see some flashes of Dr. Tar intermittently hanging out with a friend of his who he's playing cards with, and you're not sure what the significance of that is. There's also a repeating motif of it traces the night on the clock, the hands of a clock, and that juxtaposed, I guess, upon the card motif and the kind of non-linear scenes, it gives it kind of a surreal feeling. And once we get into the supernatural element, kind of full bore, it becomes totally surreal and a lot of fun. But basically, as it kind of comes together by the end of the movie, you realize that the plot pivots on the fact that Tawan was going to, out of hurt and rejection by Dr. Tar, was going to narc on them for their illegal body organ black market operation. So she does, and he orders the nurses to hold her down and to, well, silence her. And it kind of goes back and forth. The scene pops up here and there, and it takes a while before it plays out and you see what's really happening, which is that he definitely wants them to kill her. And throughout this film, these bon vivant nurses, in between their frolicking and such, are slowly getting killed off in more and more imaginative fashion by this creature who is kind of evocative of the J horror archetype. You know, basically the shadowy kind of figure with the long black hair that covers their entire face. Um, you know, I'm not sure why that would be so frightening in Asia because I'm sure many women have that look just naturally, but I guess it's like an extreme, you know, ghostly manifestation of that look. So it's kind of co-opted by this Thai movie, but the difference is over time you do see more of the face and the features and the eyes, and it's not just all black. There's a lot of green, a real sickly kind of green coloring, dark green skin on this character, and she's got kind of, you know, robes and bandages that are kind of also that same dark green. But then, you know, as time goes on, you see more and more of her body and her features as time goes on. Like her dress sweeps aside, and you see she's got these kind of almost diamond encrusted high heels, and she has golden eyes, and you know, she looks basically like a lovely young Japanese woman who's all green, and her hair is kind of one of her weapons. You know, she wraps people up in her hair and wraps them in their own hair, and she takes possession of their limbs, and when she does, their hands become that same kind of dark green color that her flesh is. So that's the visual signifier that she's possessed them. And the killings get pretty ingenious. I don't want to spoil too much, but you know, like there's one where one of the characters is apparently a bulimic or anorexic, and self-conscious about, you know, eating too much in her figure, and the creature, the ghostly figure, who can kind of make anything happen basically telekinetically, causes her to swallow this giant thing of razor blades, and of course she starts bleeding, but she doesn't just bleed, her whole entire bottom jaw comes off, and she's in this room with all these kind of pickled body parts and fetuses in jars and things. And one of the jars pops open, and one of the pickled fetuses flies into this gaping maw that used to be her latter part of her face, and that kills her. I'm not making this up, but it's really, the effects are great, and it's kind of sick. It's kind of like the Freddy movies, Freddy Krueger movies, I guess at their best, maybe like Dream Warriors, or where the way that he dispatches people gets more and more grotesque and surreal, and is outrageous, absurd, and kind of humorous, but also kind of revolting. I didn't find any of the gore revolting in this. I didn't find it extreme in that sense, but it was extreme as in lots of blood, lots of dismemberment. One character, our ghostly figure, takes control of her hands, and she has a saw and forces her to hack off her friend's limbs one by one. And then they're in this big tub, and the tub gets more and more bloody, and the limbs are floating. And amazingly, the dismembered girl is still alive somehow, for a while anyway. Nuke is the one character who seems to be able to evade a horrible fate for most of the film. She's almost killed many times by this being, and she has a slightly different look than the rest of the girls. She's a little more petite, not as slim, and her hair is kind of reddish brown. Very distinctive, lovely girl. And so you're kind of rooting for her. But, you know, the whole twist is that, you know, I'm going to go ahead and give it away. The dark green ghost is Tawan, her sister. And yes, they did kill her, and actually she was the one who delivered the fatal blow. Nuke stabbed her sister in the heart. You don't know this until near the very end of the film, though. So you're kind of like, man, this is glad this chick, the most likable one, is barely surviving, and you're thinking, oh well, she must really be the one who uh, has the most moral fortitude as far as the affair with her sister's boyfriend and carrying his child. That's a point they make many times, is that she's pregnant and she doesn't want to lose her child, and it means a lot to her, even though he's kind of just been using her. Uh, so that was a big twist, but there's other big twists. I mean, it gets really crazy. They accumulate toward the end. We also learned that well, when things finally catch up with Nuke, she um, and Dr. Tar both come face to face with the spirit of Tawan, and it's a scene almost exactly out of Takashi Miike's Gozu, where a person begins giving birth to a full-grown human, even though, of course, that completely violates all laws of physics as to how that full-grown being would fit inside and come out. And exactly what happens here, and it's basically like a reborn Tawan who punishes Dr. Tar. And the final twist we learn is that the man that in flashback Dr. Tar has been having these cryptic card games with was his lover, and there was a taboo against them being married, I guess because it was 2007 Thailand and they were gay. I don't know what the laws were then about gay marriage, but it's socially taboo, I assume. And so this male card playing buddy has a sex change so they can get married, and changes into Tawan, the character who is, brutally dispatched and haunts everyone and destroys them. So this is a wild ride. I mean, anything that can happen does. I'm not really doing it justice because there's a lot of visual inventiveness. There's strange stuff, and one thing is that Nuke carries around her her pregnancy test, a little plastic thing, and it's come up positive, and she's all happy. So she like carries with her. I don't know if it's like a charm or what, but she becomes besieged by all these nurses that are like corpses that are faceless, and again have the black hair, and they're like zombies. And she actually managed to stab them and ward them off with this little pregnancy kit, jabbing them in the neck and the face. I mean, it's absurd, but it works because you're not seeing any of this coming, and you realize after a while none of it's really to be taken seriously. However, it is so melodramatic at times, and yet also so ridiculous. I mean, it really kind of it takes those grotesque tropes from the J horror films and the South Korean horror films, and almost like makes fun of them, almost exaggerates to them to the point of being utterly ridiculous. So I love this movie. It had a lot of energy, it had a lot of inventiveness. It was insane, frenetic. So I give Sick Nurses a recommendation. The first one. The next film that I saw, uh, which wasn't as successful for me, I'm going to try to find it on here. Uh, it was called Madness of Men, and it was one of the kind of more on the extreme side. I think Unearthed Films may have put it out as well, and as a lot of these films that I pointed out last time, in order to save on budget, they filmed them with post sync sound, no live sound, and so they often have not much dialogue, and they'll have narration to push the narrative forward, and that makes sense. And in a lot of cases, the narration is very nihilistic, and it's kind of setting this grisly tone, and then you see the kind of grisly visuals. Well, this one, The Madness of Vinny, took that kind of format that I've seen in other extreme underground films, but uh, I don't know, man. I mean, it looked pretty good. I guess it was shot on video, maybe high end. I don't know. I mean, there were shots that were nice, but the fact is, nothing really happens on screen all that much. Uh, a lot of it is just their main character, a blonde woman who, based on the voiceover, sounds like she's from Scandinavia, if that's even the same person doing the voiceover. That character, she's out in the snow, she's wandering, and again, there's these long contemplative shots, and the narration is just telling us over and over how the world is shit, and she's been raped since she was a child, and everything horrible has happened to her, and life is brutal and vile and endlessly painful, and it's just angst, and it just goes on, and you don't really see much of any of this. So it's kind of a definite violation of the show don't tell maxim that a lot of writers hold to. I'm not saying you have to always hold to it, but this one completely upends it. I mean, basically, she tells us everything, and all we see, the most horrifying things, and yet all we see is just her wandering around in the park, kind of bummed out. And then we see flashbacks of her doing drugs. And then after a while, some of the flashbacks of her doing drugs, she's played by a different actress. I don't know if she's supposed to be much younger. She doesn't look that much younger. She looks a bit different. And some of that is filmed with live sound, and the actress has a totally different voice, no Scandinavian accent. So it's like a totally different character, but it seems to be the same character in flashback once we finally get into actually seeing some of this stuff happen. And so we finally get into some of the cases where, she was sold into prostitution at a young age, and, we finally start getting into the heavy drug abuse, like I said, but we finally start getting into some of the abusive, I guess, customers, clients, or pimps, and how they torture her and chain her naked and start cutting away at her, and there's blood everywhere, and there's a lot of these extreme close-ups, and it's baleful music, and it's that similar mood and that kind of washed out monochromatic uh, style of shooting, and I've seen it in quite a few of these kind of movies. And to me, what needs to differentiate that is something about the story or the style or the ideas or the cinematic flair involved that overcomes the small budget and the very threadbare kind of stories that are basically just saying life is horrible. We're going to show you how horrible it is, or in this case, we're just going to tell you about it and not show you. We can't afford, I guess, too many gore effects for this one. A lot of the stuff that she narrates, a lot of her narration, some of the writing is really good, and is actually pretty nice little kind of existentialist, angst-ridden poetry. But then some of but then she'll turn around the next line and go, "Yeah, so life is shit, and you're like, okay." And there's not much more to be said of this. I couldn't finish it because halfway through it was going nowhere. It was building up to these scenes, which I knew were going to play out the way they have in other films like this I've seen. They're going to start showing more and more of her being tortured and beaten and cut, and and again, it's going to be in that kind of washed out way, and the whole time she just can't stop narrating. They go between the narrator, the Scandinavian sounding woman, and the younger girl taking the drugs, who's talking and basically just saying, well, then I did this and then I did that, and this is my, and life is shit, and so we kind of got the point that life is excrement, and there's really not much else to be said about this one. I know I'm being a bit flip about it, but I'm kind of hyper right now. That's part of it, I guess. But I'm also just I'm seeking something in these kind of movies, and it's kind of like I said before about things like the found footage subgenre and things of that nature, where I'm kind of a sucker for them, and that's how I am kind of with these really extreme titles, a lot of which are distributed through Unearthed, and um, it's that I'm endlessly curious about them, so I'll check them out, and almost every time I'm horribly disappointed. And but there's that once in a great while a gem will appear and something will resonate with me, and like the found footage stuff. I was watching a lot of it a couple of years ago, and I was starting to kind of get a little discouraged, and then I found Rec and Rec 2, and they were incredible. I mean, they're classics, modern classics. I rewatched them again recently and was not at all disappointed. Actually, I finally saw Rec 4, which I had not seen before, which was a disappointing ending to the series. But anyway, um, same with these kind of extreme films. I mean, I'll find some that are genuinely interesting to me. Like I waded through Olaf Ittenbach's filmography a couple of years ago, and it was all over the map, quality wise, and also story wise, acting wise, and how extreme it was. Uh, but there was this one No Reason, which I think now is about to come out on Blu-ray, which there was something that an intelligence in it and a style to it, and definitely a strong performance that gave it kind of a different dimension for me. I'm not saying it's like a classic, but it's my favorite of his films, for instance. Um, Mariandora's films are very well made. I had hopes for Melancholy Near England going into it. It got a little faux philosophical and very artsy, but then it just turned into total trash and just kind of reveled in being trash to the point where it did test my limits because of how crass it was. I mean, it should have been like a Salo-like movie, ideally. I mean, that's what I was hoping for, or a movie like the Marquis de Sade adaptation, this litany of perversions and deviations made manifest. But it kind of was that, but it was so banal and so heartless, and a lot of animal cruelty, more sadistic, maybe less graphic overall, but more sadistic than what you would see in the Italian cannibal genre of yore. I mean, when you're starting to, hack apart a pig uh, while you're having sex under it, or the character's allegedly raping a character under this pig being hacked apart, and the pig's really being hacked apart, and they're doing the simulated rape. They could have really been doing the rape, And then there's, they murder a cat, and it looks pretty fucking real, and it's disturbing. So I didn't finish Melancholy Dear England or Melancholy of the Angels. I know some people love it, but occasionally something will surprise me. Karim Hussein's Subconscious Cruelty, I think, was the best of his that I've seen, and it had a certain literacy to its narration and dialogue, and artfully done, very extreme and cruel, but I would peg him as the perfect guy to adapt Octave Mirbeau's Torture Garden, which was made into a film in the 70s, which I used to have a kind of a washed out copy, sans subtitles, uh, which I reviewed for Shock Cinema. I don't have that copy anymore, and it is impossible to find. I keep hoping it'll pop up on YouTube. Um, or someone will re-release and put subtitles. I quite enjoyed it. I thought it was, from what I could tell, a good adaptation. But if someone were to do a modern adaptation with that kind of grisly vibe that I picture in my mind's eye when I read Mirbeau, uh, Kareem Hassan would probably be the right guy. Maybe not direct it, but shoot it. He's also done a lot of cinematography for relatively mainstream horror. I mean, he shot a few great episodes of Hannibal. He's kind of all over the map. He did a movie called The Beautiful Beast with Carol Lore of Sweet Movie fame, and I don't think she's aged in 40 years. it was very decadent, and it wasn't really that extreme in what it showed, but I didn't like it ultimately. But I got what he was going for. I think I appreciated certain aspects of it. But anyway, I've gone way off on a tangent about all these extreme filmmakers. The next movie I'm going to talk about is one that I did see originally in 2016 when it first came out. Uh, I was at my buddy the Marksman's house, and he had actually rented it on Amazon. It was premiering on Amazon. I won't do that. I won't rent movies. I have to see them free. I'm just too broke and slack. I did my renting back in the Cockbuster video days, and that was enough. So that was like a small fortune, and they were a lot cheaper than they are now. Um, so this movie I watched with Marksman, and I have sleep apnea, and I had not had much sleep the night before, and back then it was plaguing me a bit more than it does now, and so I kind of drifted off and missed large chunks of the movie. So the film is called The Void, and I'm sure a lot of people have heard of it. I'm gonna check this out in here. It was co-directed by Jeremy Gillespie and Steven Kostanski, and they are two of the partners in the Astron 6 um, production company, which has done like Father's Day, and I want to say they did Tater City, but I could be wrong. They did a number of kind of, they're like horror comedies, and they're very extreme, and they're often very ingenious, very interesting effects. Says here they did one called Goreblade. I have not seen that one. Father's Day I've seen, yes, and it was pretty wild. And there's at least a couple of others of theirs I've seen too. I want to say Tater City was part of that production, but it could have been a different. I saw it around the same time. It was like a dystopian science fiction. Oh yeah, and they did a kind of a cyborg one. I can't remember the name of it, but it was kind of almost like Robo War by Bruno Mattei. But and again, really great effects and ingenious, high energy. Kind of these guys. I think Father's Day might have been distributed through Troma, and I got to say that they out Troma almost all the Troma films. So, we were interested to find out that, people who liked Astron 6's stuff were interested to find out they were going to do a serious horror film, and that is The Void. So, Void mostly has actors that most people aren't familiar with. They're all really solid. It does have a small role played by Art Hingel, who played the estranged husband in David Cronenberg's The Brood. Art Hindle, sorry. And the villain is, physically played through most of the movie, and his voice all through the movie, performed by Kenneth Welsh, who is, best known as Twin Peaks Kenneth Welsh. He played Wyndham Earl. And, Wyndham Earl was a goofy character. I mean, the way they handled him, he was extremely sadistic and maniacal and multi-talented and brilliant and into the occult and wanted power from the Dogpas and all this stuff, but he acted kind of goofy. And but when Lynch directed him in the final episode, he came off as serious and frightening. But then compared to Bob, he shriveled into nothingness, and that was cool because it kind of revealed the false threat of that character. The character was a manipulator, but really was not the prime mover behind all the evil going on in Twin Peaks. That was coming out of the Black Lodge. And of course, Kenneth Welsh wanted to, his character, Wyndham Earl, wanted to go into the Black Lodge and basically master the Black Lodge and take all of its power. So I knew Welsh is capable of doing that kind of character from that one episode, even though they played him in a different kind of fashion in the previous episodes. He did a great job in this. He's much older. He looks very different, but his voice is great and his performance is fantastic. Basically, this is kind of very much an 80s horror homage. It is kind of put into a blender the films of that era by John Carpenter, Lucio Fulci, and Clive Barker. So, like the first Hellraiser, uh, stuff like Prince of Darkness. Obviously, there's some Assault on Precinct 13 in there. That was the 70s Carpenter, but still. Of course, The Beyond by Fulci, and uh, this is its DNA. And it was one thing that made me a little resistant to it when I first saw it. I felt like a lot of it, especially the ending, was maybe too on the nose as a tribute, homage, riff, whatever, on The Beyond, which is one of the great horror movie endings of any film ever, in my opinion. And the ending is one of the few things I remembered about The Void the first time I watched, like the early part and the ending, and I missed almost all the middle. Uh, anyway, it's very well made. Uh, it's it's suspenseful, it's entertaining, it keeps moving. It's not dull at all. It's kind of has that old school feeling. The characters are not particularly deep, but they're distinctive enough. Carpenter was really good at that in Prince of Darkness and several of his other movies, of course. But in Prince of Darkness, it's like a siege movie, kind of like Prince of Darkness and Assault on Precinct 13 combined. In Prince of Darkness, they're trapped in this church where the father of Satan, or the unmaker of the universe, is coming to consciousness in this giant tank of green fluid and infecting the people there, the students there who are studying it, and they're kind of trapped there. And Assault on Precinct 13, is Carpenter's second feature film, and it's like an urban Night of the Living Dead. They're trapped in a police station that is moving, and it has all but moved to another area. And on its last night there, a skeleton crew and one particularly dangerous prisoner who ends up having to stay there the night get besieged by these gang members who have done this kind of blood ritual, a cholo, and they've declared, they're basically going to annihilate all these cops. Well, they basically annihilate anybody who gets in their way. I mean, they shoot a little girl who's having a French vanilla twist ice cream. That's kind of an infamous scene. Great movie, Assault on Precinct 13, and this movie is like that. It's and in the Beyond, a lot of the action takes place in a hospital. One of our main characters, John McCabe, named after the character in McCabe and Mrs. Miller. But this Dr. John McCabe, played by David Warbeck, he works in this hospital in New Orleans and crosses paths with Catriona McCall's character, who is Eliza, and she's inherited this hotel, which is over the gateway of the Seven Doors of Hell. I did a review of the Beyond of Halloween on this channel, so check it out. But anyway, a lot of the action takes place in the hospital, and so this kind of combines all this together. Basically, they're trapped, besieged in a hospital that is transferring to another location. And it's a cop, and it's his ex-wife who's the nurse there, and his doctor, played by Kenneth Welsh, I guess the chief of staff, and Richard Powell's his character's name. And then there's this kind of crazy guy that that the cop finds and brings to the hospital. And of course, there's a couple of gun-toting dudes who want to kill this guy who claimed he went on a mass murder spree, and they're like, "Let us have him," and it's kind of like straw dogs there, and of course the cop's like, "No, I won't let you have him." But by the end of it, the cop is basically thinks he's a scumbag too. He wasn't actually responsible for these murders that happened in this other place, but he was tied into this cult, and this cult is kind of opening a doorway, and their symbol is like this black triangle, a doorway to another universe, another reality. They're trying to stave off death. It turns out the doctor himself is the head of the cult, and he's died and created a new body for himself, where he no longer looks like Kenneth Welsh. He still has his voice, but he looks more like a kind of a Frank and Hellraiser kind of look. Not exactly like skinned and realistic, but kind of similar to that, crossed with Molasar from The Keep, that kind of look. So again, a very 80s creature kind of look. He looks really cool, and this doctor is trying to resurrect his dead daughter. Um, and so there's these themes going through it because the cop and the nurse, they lost a child. And there's also a girl in the hospital who is pregnant, and she's there with her grandfather, and they're trying to deliver a baby. And you've got this character named Kim, who's an Asian nurse, and she reminded me kind of, I don't know if it was on purpose or not, but a little bit of Dennis Dunn's Asian character. Well, he's an Asian actor in Prince of Darkness. This kind of wry comic relief, but and also getting trapped in like a closet between two things. Exactly what happened to that character happens to Kim. So yeah, there's tons of riffs on other movies, but it's actually a lot more seamless than I thought it was when I first saw it. I really enjoyed it, and the twists are interesting. The dialogue that the doctor is kind of unveiling his plans to the cop with really well written stuff. Very cool, just strong, serious occult horror kind of stuff like the first Hellraiser, which kind of broke the mold when it came out because there were so many glib slasher movies that were popular then. And Prince of Darkness also was an incredibly intelligent, gory supernatural movie when it came out. I think it's one of Carpenter's best scripts. But anyway, the main character, he's pretty likable. You're with him, and the nurse gets taken by the crazy doctor, and it's a little ambiguous what happens. She seems like she's going to give birth to a new life, and then we find out that the pregnant girl is supposedly carrying the child of the doctor and going to give birth to a new life. And I don't know if it's the daughter reincarnated. In each case, they hint that it's the daughter reincarnated, the original daughter. And then that pregnant girl ends up killing some of the characters because she's been in the thrall of the doctor the whole time. One of the twists we found out near the end. And one of the two guys who was hunting down the crazy dude that the cops saved, they came from a place where like a whole family was annihilated by this cult. And, they found all these pictures, and they see that this cult has been doing these activities for ages, and they've basically been, I guess, kidnapping people, taking people, killing people, and I don't know, harvesting their organs, using them for these experiments in life and death, using the energy from the void, and the doctor's kind of the orchestrator of it. He's got like a room down there, like the whole sub-basement is like this hidden area. So it's really cool the way they keep going down, and the cop is on the walkie-talkie with the Asian nurse, and it's just got a lot of great touches. Very, very well put together. I think it has been overpraised at the time it came out, but now that some distance has come between it and then and now, I think I at least can appreciate it on its own merits and still say, it steals from some great sources, but it still makes it its own story. And it's still serious, and it's still well done, and it's inventive, and it looks good. Acting is good. The effects are great, of course. Like I said, Astron 6 really knows their shit technically. They don't label this an Astron 6 film because they wanted this to be taken more seriously. And it's funny because for all the hype when this first came out, I almost think now it's kind of under-discussed, maybe. So maybe it's time to reappraise it. It definitely was the time for me to reappraise it. The last thing I want to say about it is that ending. I did like the way it was done, but it is like the Beyond, but it's a little different. But it's also, you're not like the Beyond. You're not exactly sure what's going on. In some ways, it's more vague than the ending of the Beyond. In the Beyond, it's like they've They've crossed over into the beyond. They've crossed over into the painting, and they're inside the painting. And it's this, they see the sea of darkness and all that shall be foretold and all that. And it's beautiful, Fabio Frizzi, beautiful music. Um, I had the honor and pleasure of seeing Fritzy and his prog rock band score live a screening of The Beyond here in Charlotte at this fancy Blumenthal Performing Arts Center. That was incredible. I may have mentioned that in another video, but it was an incredible evening, incredible experience. I was telling a friend of mine that I've gotten to know recently, named Bathsheba, who's very, very avid film buff, especially horror. I was telling her about it, and but anyway, you can't top the Beyond. Bill White, my good buddy Bill White. Bill White, ladies and gentlemen, Bill White said, what's up with the void? I'm paraphrasing. What's up with the void? Why would it take the best horror movie ending ever and just duplicate it? So I get what he's saying, and in this one, yes, they go into the void instead of the beyond. They go into the void. He like the cop pushes the the evil doctor into the void after trying to kill him, and the doctor has made him a deal that he can live on in the void, and he will be reunited with. I think her name's Melissa. Was that her name, Melissa? His Laura. I don't know. His wife, the nurse, who's a really strong character and actors. But you think you've seen her dying after being extricated from the doctor's plan to make her spawn something. But there they are, and they're in. I was going to say in the beyond. They're in the void together, and there's stars all around, and it is like a void. I mean, they're in a field, but and then they hold hands and they close up right when their hands clasp, and that's the end. It's like, my God, really great. Didn't have the music of Fritzy, but it's not Fulci, but I liked it. So I'm going to try to hurry this up. I've kind of gone on and on about these movies. I hope you guys don't mind. I kind of miss doing this stuff as much as I used to. And the kind of projects I'm working on now for the channel, like the space rock history, it's going to be a lot more in depth and hopefully more, I don't want to say scholarly, but more instructive, better paced. I put a lot into it, and I've done the introduction, of course, it's here on my channel, and pretty soon I'm going to debut installment number 1. I'm working on that. So this is a little different. This is more informal, and maybe not informal like me waxing about my personal life or the horrible state of the political arena, but maybe a little more informally than I had been for a while about movies. Because I'm not really telling you this is the Blu-ray and here it is and this is the specs and trying to really recommend it to you and give you the experience. I'm just giving you impressions, kind of like I originally did with my music ones. So I'm going to move on to, I'm going to go ahead and just round off with 4 instead of 5 since this is running kind of long. Dragged Across Concrete from 2018 by Craig Zoller. So I've been wanting to see this since it came out too. I liked his first movie, Bone Tomahawk, quite a bit. I really loved his second movie. God, what's the name of it? Riot in Cell Block. I'm never gonna get it right. If I look him up though, I'll get it right. I picked this as one of my favorite movies. The year it came out, and which was 2017, and Brawl in Cell Block 99. It has a good old 70s exploitation kind of title and basic premise. But I gotta say, man, it's a powerhouse of a movie, and Vince Vaughn has never been better. He's incredible, and he started out, as kind of a comedian slash serious actor, and got popular with Swingers. And then he did the Psycho remake, the shot by shot Gus Van Sant Psycho remake. And then I guess he just gave up on serious acting after that. I don't know, it was like a curse. But then he became kind of a star of a lot of like kind of cheesy frat boy humor kind of films. And he rode that train for a long time, but he's really back with a vengeance. True Detective season two, which a lot of people don't care for that much, it's not as great as season one or season three, but damn it, it is still great. Colin Farrell and what's her name? Amy McAdam, Rachel Adam, the woman from the Notebook, not the woman Amy Adams from Superman. Um, those two and Vince Vaughn are the three main characters, and they're all just amazing. And so when I saw that, I was like, man, Vaughn's really back with a vengeance. And then I saw Brawl in Cell Block 99. He's just amazing. And Jennifer Carpenter, who I love to death from Dexter as Deborah Morgan, Dexter's adopted sister. She's his love interest, and it's just a great movie. I mean, it's just powerful. His character has. Okay, well, I'm not reviewing Brawl and Sublime. I'm reviewing the subsequent film, also by Greg Zoller, and also starring Vince Vaughn, and also featuring Jennifer Carpenter. And Don Johnson is in both of them also. So this has a really great cast. Some of them I was not familiar with. Corey Kittles, who's kind of the co-lead main character next to Vince Vaughn and Mel Gibson. Mel Gibson is gets top billing. Mel Gibson and Vince Vaughn have one storyline, and then there's another storyline with Corey Kittles. He's this young black guy who's just been let out of prison, and he's tempted by an easy job to make some money to keep his mom from being a junkie and a prostitute at her advanced stage. And he's got a handicapped little brother. And it kind of starts with his story, really. And then we move into the two cops. And it's interesting because when this movie came out, there was some controversy over some comments Zoller made on Twitter about woke people and, political matters. And it made it sound as though he was basically arch right winger, or that he was some kind of white supremacist, or he had this kind of, he was like he was knocking Black Lives Matter or knocking like politically correct situations. I don't know where a lot of that came from. It was like mythology, and it wasn't helped by the fact that Mel Gibson was his star, who had just come off this kind of run of lunatic behavior and anti-Semitic commentary. I think he allegedly told Winona Ryder that she was I forgot how he put it. Like was she an oven jumper or an oven avoider? I forgot how he put it. Basically implying that all Jews, go into the oven like we're in World War II. That's pretty fucked up. Of course, he denied it, and I'm sorry I blew the story by not remembering the phrase, but it basically had to do with Jews being put into ovens, and Winona described Mel as less than charitable. I don't know if it's true or not. I would believe Winona over Mel anyway, but I've always been a Winona partisan and a big fan, even when she was having troubles and shoplifting and stuff. She's kind of my generation, and I kind of, I want to say grew up with her, but we were roughly teenagers at the same time, and I followed her from Heathers and Edward Scissorhands all the way up to Stranger Things, and I love her. Whereas Mel Gibson, I really dislike his acting for the most part. I think he's a very overrated actor. Very overrated actor. He's a solid, competent director, but I don't like his films. His conservatism kind of oozes through his work when he makes films, and I thought Braveheart was just a load of crap, and Passion of Christ was just, I don't know. I don't know what it was. Anyway, I did watch it. I didn't see Apocalypto. I'd give it a shot. I heard it's his best movie he directed. He was fine in the Mad Max films. But he's limited. He's always been very limited. and play to type. Okay, so that having all been said, him being thrown into this movie with this controversy, more of a turn off for people, but brilliant casting. I don't know if I want to call it stunt casting exactly, but he's the older partner of these two cops, him and Vince Vaughn, and Gibson's incredible in this movie. I've seen him in a lot of movies, and this is by far my favorite performance of his. I don't see how he could ever top this one. And he's playing kind of against to type and against type simultaneously. He's playing like a cop, and he's got a gun, and he has always like Mr. Action Man from Lethal Weapon and stuff. But this character is vulnerable. He's pushing 60, and actually Mel was a little over 60 when he shot this. And when you first meet him and Vince Vaughn's characters, you get the impression that they're maybe, and I thought this from reading about the movie, I thought they were like totally corrupt cops. I thought they were basically, with the racial element, I thought they weren't too many notches removed from that real life piece of shit, Derek Chauvin, who just went to prison. And there's zillions of cops like him who deserve to be punished and prosecuted. Actually, these cops weren't like that. They were a little overzealous. They were a little burnt out, and they did kind of rough up a Hispanic guy, but they really didn't use really much overt racism to him. I mean, it's kind of ambiguous. You're kind of expecting it because they're cops and they're doing this, and the guy's protesting, but they could have just shot him and killed him. In reality, that's what would have happened. They would have just blown his head off. Instead, they just cuff him roughly and kind of humiliate him. But they do confiscate a bunch of drugs that was going to be sold to some elementary school children, allegedly. So you're wondering, and then some of their conversations where they're talking about political correctness and how the world has changed, you're kind of wondering, are they racist? Are they, I don't know. They don't seem on the take, but overzealous is a good way to put it. But anyway, this is captured on a cell phone. So, they basically lose their jobs over this. They take a suspension without pay, and apparently Gibson's character's been suspended before without pay for being a little rough. He says he's almost 60 and he hasn't risen a grade since he was 27, and he began as kind of an idealistic cop. And Vaughn is supposed to be young enough to be his son, and Vaughn, his character, is also pretty idealistic. I mean, they're a little rough, but compared to real cops, man, these guys they're like fucking Starsky and Hutch. I mean, they're right on. And that's the twist. I mean, as you get into the movie, and the next twist, you find that Vince Vaughn's fiance is a black woman, and she makes fun of the fact that she's like, well, what did you get filmed, roughing up another minority today? And, she's much more intelligent than him and classy, but he really loves her. And then you find out Mel Gibson's wife has multiple sclerosis. She's an ex-cop. I don't know the actress's name. Very lovely and good actress. And they have a daughter who gets picked on by kids on the street, who are usually black guys hanging out. And, she makes a comment like, I thought I was the most liberal ex-cop. I never thought I would be racist till I moved to this neighborhood, but it's pushing me there. And I know it's a fair enough comment given her situation and her circumstances. I don't agree with her, but she isn't really overtly racist. She's just kind of saying this is the situation we're in. And it's really a socioeconomic situation because he has been such a fuck up, Gibson, as a cop. They can't afford to live anywhere but in the hood and, in low income housing. And because of her handicap, she can't work. And so they're really poor. They're really desperate. Vaughn wants to buy his beautiful girlfriend an engagement ring and spends all his money on it. And then this shit happens, and they're brought up before Don Johnson, the chief. Don Johnson is pretty hard on them. Apparently, he's known Gibson. He came up with Gibson, but he has worked his way up the ladder, and Gibson is kind of failing downward. And so by the time you're like a third of the way through the movie, you've kind of gotten your expectations upset a few different ways. And by that time, I totally thought that all the controversy I read over this movie was ridiculous. These characters weren't what they were portrayed to be or what they were perceived as, and the director is not peddling some white supremacist, anti-Black Lives Matter ideology. It's all bullshit. So if you were turned off from seeing this movie from any of that stuff, then don't be, watch it. It's all a lie. So anyway, halfway through, we're introduced to Jennifer Carpenter. She doesn't have a very big role, but it's a very key role, and it's an example of how he'll take these moments for characterization and kind of, extend them a bit, open things up and get into these people's heads. And he does it with our two main actors. He does it with Corey Kittle's character, and he does it with Jennifer Carpenter's character. And later, to a lesser extent, Tori Kittle's partner, he gets a childhood friend to help him on this thing. So there's all these disparate plot points going on. Like, she's had a baby and she doesn't want to go back to work and leave her baby, and she works in a bank. And when I heard she works in a bank, I thought, uh-oh. And then there's also this masked assassin who's like just sadistically killing people. His character is a racist, very much so. There are actually three of them, you find out. They're all dressed identically, like they're a super villain team. And you never know any of their names or whatever. Just they're all white. They're all mean, sadistic killers, and they're racists and assholes. But this character keeps popping up, and there's some kind of connection between him and, I think the town they live in is something like called Bulwark or something. But there's like a security vehicle there, because earlier Gibson's wife mentioned she might take a job with them because they need the money, and he's like, you need to take painkillers to peel potatoes. You're not going to be able to be a security guard. And so we get introduced to the security vehicle, and we find out also that Mel Gibson has a plan to get himself out of poverty once and for all. And he offers it to Vince, and he tells him, you don't have to do this. This is all on me. Gibson's character is a really noble guy, and he has a lot of interesting quirks about him. When he's talking about a situation and its outcome, he always says, this is going to be a 30% here. Then based on this, maybe a 20% there. Like he puts everything by ratios, and he also talks a lot about temptation, and he's a real interesting fucking character, and actually a lot more noble than you think until you see the movie unfold. And when him and Vaughn decide to stake out this place where some illicit activity is going through, under the aegis of this German guy, and they're not sure what exactly he's going to pull. What kind of, is he going to do a heist? What's he going to deal drugs? What's he going to do? But they're going to try to snatch the money from him when the time is right. It turns out our two friends who grew up together, the two young black men, they are the job they're alluding to, that they are reluctant at first to do, but they need the money. They are roped into this too. And the masked racist assassins. It's all the same thing. Basically, the two black guys put on white face and dress as security guards for this Bulwark place, get one of their vans, and inside the van, they've got these three black-clad masked assassins, and they've got Thomas Kretschmann, who plays the German guy whose place they were staking out. And, of course, the plan is still, as our two disgraced cops are tailing them, the plan is still to snatch their money away from them. And they don't know that what they're trying to get out is some gold bullion that just got delivered to the bank. So this is how and the way we bring that thread together is when Jennifer Carpenter is persuaded by her husband to go back to work. So her first day back to work, in 3 months, they give her a cake and everything, and then the black clad assholes come in, and they're very cold, they're very demented, and they basically are like, anybody move, we're going to annihilate all of you, and I want you, meaning Jennifer Carpenter, you seem nice and trustworthy, handcuff everybody. And the two black guys are out there in the van, kind of, the getaway deal. And our two cops have found this, but they don't know what's happening until they're kind of upon it. And they realize that, okay, their gig is robbing a bank. And Gibson doesn't think, and I think he may give percentages on this likelihood, he doesn't think that they're going to kill anyone in the bank. And our two buddies, who are the getaway drivers, they also have been told that no one's going to get killed unless in self-defense. They don't realize yet how psychopathic these people are. And Kreshman is crouching in the back of the van. Now, Kreshman is good at playing villainous dudes, and he played Dracula in Argento's Dracula, but that wasn't one of his better moments. But, he's Baron Strucker in the Age of Ultron. He's been in a ton of movies. I liked him as a non-villain, Nikopol, in Immortal, a great European comic book adaptation. He's fantastic in that. And he was great in as the killer in Stendhal Syndrome by Argento. So always liked him. So his role is small but key. And another person, another German actor, has an even smaller but arguably key role, is the guy who tips Gibson off to the place they're staking out, and he's played by Udo Kier. So that was nice to see him, albeit for like 5 minutes. So when these people shake down the bank, one of the guys in the bank, as Jennifer is getting ready to handcuff him, he started typing a email to notify the police, and he wants to hit send. And they've already been told anything, anyone makes a false move, it. These are going to annihilate everybody. And she tries to stop him, and he goes for it, and she tries to stop him and reaches for his hand, which is reaching for the send button, and it's pretty brutal. One of the assassins blows one of her hands off and half the fingers off on the other. And it's like all the violence in this movie, it's happens super fast, it's super powerful, it's really intense, really graphic, and you have to kind of rewind it a couple of times. I did, and see what's going on. And it's pretty brutal. And this is kind of the most emotional moment in the whole movie, really, is she's laying on the ground, and she's been kind of fondling this footsie little baby mitten, whatever you call it. I don't have a baby, so I don't know what they're called. But yeah, we all wore them as babies. Anyway, she's been knitting one for the son, Jackson, we saw earlier, that she doesn't want to leave behind. Now, mind you, she almost didn't go to work that day. Her husband talked her into going back to work because they needed the money. So it's another one of those fateful kind of situations. And it all kind of comes crashing down. She's, one of her hands, she's missing the two middle fingers, and she reaches into her pocket and she's holding this little baby booty, and she's like, "Will you give this to my son? His name is Jackson." And man, it is just and then they blow her head off. And it's just my God. I mean, it's just I had to rewatch it not a couple of times, not just for to see the effects and the way they did the gore, but I also wanted to just see her performance. It was just so powerful. So even though she doesn't have a large role in the movie, I would say it's a pretty damn key, powerful role. So basically things continue to go crazy from there. they finally realize that, Gibson and Vaughn realize that they kind of fucked up. They could have prevented all these people being killed because sure enough, they murder everyone in the bank and take one woman as a hostage. And they decide that, fuck it, whether they get the money from them or not, they're going to stop this. They're not going to call it in. They're not going to ask for any other help. They've already brought a good bit of, bulletproof vests and helmets and machine guns and tear gas. So they're somewhat equipped, but, they're out, no, I want to say outgunned. That's not the right word. They're outstripped by this little cadre of psychos. But they follow them all the way to the rendezvous point. And our two guys driving, they wipe the white makeup off and, they start reminiscing about their childhood. And the driver, especially, not Tori Kittles, but his friend, is really nervous about all this. And Tori's like, you're going to get through it alive, man. We're going to make it. And he starts reminiscing about their childhood. And again, anybody who thought this movie had some kind of racist message is insane. Because Tori Kittles turns out to be the key character in the entire movie, and what is motivating him and why it's motivating him, and it has a lot to do with the plight of African American poor people in America, and well, poor whites too. But I mean, it reminded me a lot of '70s movies where like the Mac gets rich and he buys his mom like a penthouse or whatever, or well, he buys his mom a house, and yeah, and then Black Caesar similarly when he gets rich he buys the penthouse and he kicks out the white people that she worked for and throws their clothes out the window and gives her the whole penthouse. And so it's kind of like that. This guy he ends up doing the same thing. His ill-gotten gains, quote unquote, he uses to give back, to help his family, to help his community, to help his mother and brother. But he's got to go through a lot to do it. I mean, he barely escapes from the psychos, and his friend is killed, and because they try to resist them and get away themselves. And then Tori just kind of purges himself up and starts watching our two ex-cops crouched behind their car with all this equipment, trying to take on these psychos in this van after they've knocked it over at the rendezvous point. And a lot of stuff happens, and basically one after another, characters die, and you're kind of left with, well, you guessed it, Mel Gibson and Tori Kittle. So you've got the cop who is perceived as a racist thug, and then you've got the black guy who saw the footage of him on TV, and not only saw that, but he also saw Mel Gibson kill the hostage that they'd taken. And the only reason he killed her was because she came to them for help, ostensibly, but they had threatened to kill her family, and so she kills Vince Vaughn. Not at first, he doesn't die at first, but she shoots him fatally, and so he blows her away. And the black guy films that on his cell phone, but he has no context for it. And it's interesting because Gibson never explains himself about that. But he does say, hey, let's bury our friends. They take out Crashman, and it's like, let's bury our friends and split this gold bullion and go our separate ways. There's no need to kill each other. And so it's that tension, can these two polarizing figures, polarized figures trust each other? And so it's real tense up to the end. And Gibson makes a mistake, and, it finally lands on our man, Tori, to take care of everything. And he turns out to be a man of great honor in his word. And Gibson had not mistrusted him, but he was just trying to remove temptation, as he says. And Kittles is like, "What are you, a cop or a priest?" And it's just that. But in that sense, that is the theme of the movie. Maybe is about racism and classism, but it's not pro-racism. These people are under similar socioeconomic conditions, but because they've been pitted against each other, by the system, cops versus blacks. Um, they don't trust each other. Um, so it's kind of a tragic misunderstanding. Um, but the end is great. And Tori Kittle's character's arc, character's name, like mine, is Henry. Henry's arc kind of is satisfying. I mean, he's kind of like he does what I said. He takes the gold bullion and he creates that life for him and his family and his community. And I don't know. It's just it's a really touching ride. It's a very long movie. It's 2 hours and 40 minutes long, but brilliantly directed, visually fantastic, great action, great gore scenes. I hate to linger on that, but just well executed violence, action violence, very emotional, strong characterization, brilliant performances. We could go on and on. It takes its time and kind of weaves these strands together. It's almost like a more humanistic kind of Heat. I mean, it's not like Heat in the sense it doesn't have that many characters and it's not that strictly about the mechanics of the heist and their life. But like Heat, it does show these different characters and how they kind of eventually weave together and they all are part of this kind of system. And the bad guys might not be so bad and good guys might not be so good, or vice versa. um, De Niro's character in Heat is one of my favorite film characters, and it's probably my favorite De Niro part, except maybe Rupert Pupkin. uh, but so it's not as operatic as Michael Mann. It's more modern, more um, austere, but I will say it is kind of a modern crime, maybe not epic, but it's definitely maybe a mini epic. I don't know. It takes a lot of tropes that have been in a lot of these kind of movies in the last 20 years. A lot of cop films and a lot of post Michael Mann movies and a lot of post Quentin Tarantino movies. But I don't know. It to me it brings it all together really well. So I give Dragged Across Concrete thumbs up, and I have taken way too much of your time and mine, but I hope you get something out of it. And I will talk to you soon with another installment, and I'll go through my next few films that I've checked out on Tubi or elsewhere. And until then, take it easy. Thanks.